Good evening, everyone. If you're standing up in the back, we have some room down front. I know nobody ever wants to sit in front, especially when you've got a professor up on the stage that may call on you, but please come on down. So first off, I'm Corey Phelps. I'm the Dean of the Price College of Business, and I want to welcome you tonight to the Deane and Ginger Kanaly Lecture. This is part of the Deane Speaker Series here at Price College. The Kanaly Lecture Series was started by the Kanaly family to bring world-class, thought-provoking leaders to the University of Oklahoma, and I think as you're going to see here shortly, we're going to deliver on that tonight. Unfortunately, the Kanaly family could not join us in person, which is one of the reasons why we're actually recording this and live streaming this at the same time. So if you're watching Kanaly family or if you see the recording, I want to say thank you very much for your generous support for Price College. Before we get started, I want to remind you that we have a reception that's going to follow immediately this event here in the Memorial Union in Baird Lounge. So as we finish up here, we'll mosey on over there. So what I'd like to do now is to introduce our speaker for this evening. He has a 3-page resume, and I feel strongly obliged to read it all, but because of time, I'm going to try to keep it short. So Dan Schulman, up until the end of this past year, was the president, CEO, and chairman of PayPal. Now, Dan has spent his entire career democratizing and transforming financial services and e-commerce to improve the financial health of billions of people, families, and businesses around the world. Under Dan's 9-year tenure as CEO, PayPal tripled its revenues from $8 billion to $30 billion a year, quadrupled its earnings, tripled its free cash flow, grew its customer base from 150 million users worldwide to over 435 million, increased fivefold its payment volume from $230 billion a year to $1.5 trillion a year on the platform, and grew its market cap from $35 to $75 billion. Now, Dan has been recognized by a number of organizations around the world. I just want to mention a few of these: the Committee for Economic Development, the 100 Black Men of New York, the New York Urban League. He was recently knighted by the King of Luxembourg, and what I understand from Dan this morning, he is soon to be knighted or deemed a chevalier in France. So again, tremendous recognition. He was recently recognized by Fortune magazine as one of the top 3 world's greatest leaders for transitioning his organization through the COVID pandemic. He previously served as group president at American Express. Prior to Amex, Dan was president of the prepaid group at Sprint Nextel, where he led the company as its founding CEO for 8 years. Actually, that was Virgin Mobile. And prior to that, Dan was the president of Priceline. Dan's actively involved in the World Economic Forum, the Council of Foreign Relations. He serves right now as a corporate director at Verizon Communications, Cisco, Lazard, and the Cleveland Clinic. And he previously served as the non-executive chairman at Norton LifeLock, formerly known as Symantec. Dan earned a bachelor's degree from Middlebury College and an MBA from New York University's Leonard and Stern School of Business. As you're about to see, he's an avid mixed martial arts fan, and I learned this morning he's an aspiring calf roper. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dan Schulman. So as you can see, we're going to do this a bit fireside chat without the fire, of course. But I've got a series of questions that I'm going to ask Dan. But before I do, I want to let you know a couple things. Number one, this is Dan's very first trip to the state of Oklahoma. So his first visit to the University of Oklahoma. So you might be wondering, how were we able to convince Dan to come here? Well, it's because of a gentleman sitting up here in the front row, David Moffitt, who is a proud Price College alum, and a dear friend to both the college and the university. David is on the board of PayPal and has become close friends with Dan. So when I reached out to David and I said, do you think there's any chance we could get Dan Schulman to come give a talk at the University of Oklahoma? He very quickly went into action, and very short while later, we have Dan here with us. So David, thank you so much for helping us to have Dan here with us tonight. So I think I'm getting a little feedback, hopefully not too much. The other thing I'd like to say is that I've got a set of questions that I'm going to ask Dan. It'll take probably the first 35 or so minutes. We received well over 100 questions from many of you in advance. I'm going to cherry pick one or two of those, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. We've got a couple mic runners, so my hope is we'll actually make them earn their title of runner tonight. So with that, I want to start off, Dan, with basically you reflecting on your journey. So tonight we have with us, I think one of the things that makes me very happy is we have a large number of students with us tonight. Many of those students in their questions were wondering, what was your journey to PayPal? Did you always know you wanted to be the CEO of a large publicly traded company? We know that you have a strong interest in human rights and social justice. Was that ever sort of a tension in your career evolution, going the CEO for-profit route, or maybe going into work in government or an NGO or a nonprofit? So what I think everybody in the audience would like to know is, what was the journey that led you eventually to becoming CEO, chairman, and president of PayPal, and here with us tonight?
Well, first of all, I was never chairman of PayPal. So that was somebody else who is chairman. I don't want to take away from a good friend of mine. That's John Donahoe, who's the CEO of Nike, and he would kill me if I was trying to, take over his title. So first of all, Corey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And David, I've said this many times, but when you're the CEO of a company, there are a lot of things that can go really well, and there are way more things that can go really poorly. Having a great board around you, and David was the chair and is the chair of the audit committee of PayPal. Having somebody like you, David, around as a friend, as a trusted counselor, and somebody I could always count on in all of the good times and all of the more difficult times, was something I cherish, and I want to thank you for. So thank you very much for that. So my journey to being a CEO was massively haphazard and extremely not planned. I started off my career as an assistant to a salesperson at AT&T. At that time, there were 1 million people in the Bell system, and a salesperson was about the entry-level job, and I got the job of being an assistant to a salesperson, which was a bummer. But I took it because it was the only job I could get, and I really wanted to earn, I think it was $16,000, and they offered me $12,000, and I negotiated them to like $13,800 and felt pretty awesome about it. All I could imagine at that time was, moving into a position that was 2 layers above me. My career was kind of nothing really for like 5-8 years. I was like an assistant salesperson, then I was a salesperson forever, then I was a national account manager, and then I went into a staff role in headquarters, which is the death of all people when you take a staff role in the headquarters. And I just really worked really hard, and then all of a sudden, I know when this happened, all of a sudden my career took off. But I never really aspired to be a CEO. I never even thought about it. Had I known what it was like to be a CEO, and I've been a CEO for 25 years now, a decade at PayPal and Priceline, Virgin Mobile. It's a difficult, really, really hard job with a lot of constituencies to think about. It's way more intense than people recognize, and the issues that we deal with are much different than you might imagine. They're issues of social importance. I admire you for sitting on stage with me because I have still multiple death threats against me, and most people choose not to be next to me in case there's somebody who's going to try and take me out. But don't worry, I'm good. I'm very well trained. And you might wonder, like, why would a CEO get death threats? But like, you have to think about your responsibility as the leader of a company. Like PayPal and Venmo are used to fundraise for a lot of organizations. We have roughly 35 million businesses that use PayPal or Venmo across the world, about 400 million consumers. And some of those organizations violate our acceptable use policy. Like you can't advocate for violence and use our platform. You might think that that's an easy thing to monitor for, but it's not. You know, if somebody uses Venmo and sends you like $16.88, it's actually, you know, a very disturbing message. It's coded. It's the 16 words of the white supremacist manifesto. 88 is the 8th letter of the alphabet, which is H, so HH, which is Heil Hitler. So there's all sorts of code in hatred and in violence that you have to know about. The very difficult thing is trying to figure out where hatred begins and free speech ends. We're not taught that in school. The only thing we're taught is that I'm not allowed to yell fire right now in a crowded auditorium. That apparently is a well-known fact, but very little else is around it. And so, you know, your responsibility as a CEO is one in which you need to think about what is civil and moral on your platform. Who do you take down? Who do you leave up? Most people might say, well, why are you making that judgment? Why isn't the government? But the government wants us to make that decision. They don't always want to make those decisions, but they do tell you that you need to police your platform in some sense. We have other constituencies that we need to address. We have to take care of our employees, their physical health, their mental health, their financial health. We need to take care of regulators. And you know, PayPal operates around the world, 220 different countries, so 74 different regulatory regimes. Some who have privacy policies that are at odds with other countries, and so it's a very complicated set of environment, one that is 24/7. As I mentioned up front, there's always issues going on every single day. There's something, but being the CEO of a Fortune 100 company involves, I think, moral responsibility, as well as, you know, thinking about more than just how do you maximize profits next quarter, but how do you think about your role in society? How do you think about your partnership with governments and regulators? How do you think about what technology will do to the workforce, how it might evolve going forward? And so, you know, as I think about my journey here, I never aspired to do this. I think we spend too much time thinking about the importance of our next move. Like, all of you are probably worried about, like, what's your first job out of college? And here is the truth. It doesn't matter what your first card. It has no bearing whatsoever on what your career is. So I know you're spending a lot of time agonizing over it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Here's what matters, is that you learn from it. You learn everything from that first job. You're all in, you give everything you can. And that first job may be terrible. You may get fired from it. It may not be everything you want, or it could be amazing. But all that is a stepping stone to your next job. That's all it is. And your next job thing, that doesn't matter either. It just, like, the things that happened to me in my career are things that I never imagined. Like, I didn't get a promotion that I really, really wanted. Because remember, I had like no upward mobility for the first 8 years. And like, I didn't get this other promotion. And I was like, you know, I think I'm like trying really hard, but nothing's really happening. And I desperately wanted the job. I didn't get it. I got lateral moved over. But my boss in that job was this amazing mentor to me, and she actually got promoted and brought me along the way. And so if I had gotten promoted, I wouldn't have met her, and my career would never have taken off. So you just don't know, but you shouldn't spend a lot of time agonizing over it. Learn, work hard every single time, and know that life is full of unpredictable things. You know, there's this saying, humans plan and God laughs, and like, that's just the way it is, right? You're gonna have a lot of bad things happen to you. You're gonna have a lot of great things happen to you. How you recover from them, how you learn from them is the single thing that will define who you are going forward. And that, by the way, is way more important than what you do. It's who you are.
I want to expand on what you were talking a little bit about earlier about the complexity of your role as a leader at PayPal. It's 24/7. It's immense in scope, and I want to talk about leadership. So you've served in senior leadership roles, a number of them. You've worked with countless leaders. You're on a board of directors, so you're working very closely with the leaders of those companies. I wonder if you could tell us or share with us, what is it that you've sort of distilled as being the traits or the characteristics of a great leader?
Well, I thought a lot about it, actually, and I get that question a lot. I was just in front of 400 people in Orlando at what's Elliott Management's conference. Elliott is a very famous activist investor, and I know them all too well. They've actually become pretty good friends of mine, surprisingly. So they invited me to speak at their conference. And, you know, I gave it kind of straight between the eyes to them. And the first question that came up, because they're always looking at leadership, that's a very important element that they look at companies, is what do you think we should be looking for in leaders? And I told them that I think there's probably 4 things that I think great leaders embody. I think the first one is that they're humble, that they're full of humility, and that means that they absolutely know for sure that they don't know everything. I just tell you one thing. If you're the smartest person in the room, you are clearly in the wrong room. That's the only thing I can say about that. You are definitely not the smartest person. And I would say most people in the world would say that I am one of the probably top, 100 people in the world to know payments and that kind of thing, like really understand it. But I know I really don't know payments. Like, people might think I do, but I really don't. And the reason I don't is because it's changing so quickly. Like, every day there's a new regulatory thing, another technological advance. Blockchain is going to fundamentally redefine the entire financial services industry, not altcoins, but blockchain, like infrastructure. So you need to be learning all the time and constantly challenge yourself. And that means listening to other people, not being defensive at all, knowing that you're definitely not going to be right most of the time, but when you are right, it should make a difference. So I think humble is really important. And like, if you do martial arts, and I've done mixed martial arts for 50 years, if you do mixed martial arts, you are humble. You are humble. Because one, no matter how good you are, if you get into a fight, you're going to be hit, and you could be beat by anybody, always. And you never know enough. And you never, should be, the other thing martial arts teaches is never to be too cocky, never to be too overconfident, because the second you are is the second you're in trouble. And to have an ego that's really in check, because the best way to win a fight is to walk away from a fight. And often your ego gets in the way from that. Somebody insults you, they insult your wife, and you can beat them badly if you engage with them, but it's the worst thing you can possibly do. You need to control all of that, control your inside, and just walk away. Because that is the best way to win. You don't have to engage in that fight. And I feel like the second trait that comes from that is this quiet confidence. Anybody who's overconfident, in my book, is probably very insecure, because you shouldn't be overconfident, kind of like you should be humble. If you're overconfident, you're compensating for something. So you need to have a quiet confidence about you that enables you to be humble, enables you to listen, and yet make decisions going forward without all the right information, knowing that you're going to be wrong at times, but you've got to make decisions as a leader. You have to be courageous enough to go and do that. And sometimes really good decisions are met with initially very poor reactions from the market. You know, and David and I went through a couple of those. Some of the biggest decisions we made at PayPal that were very, very controversial turned out to be our best decisions that we made. I'd say the other thing for a leader is they should be very authentic, very transparent, very true to themselves. I am exactly what you see. I am exactly what you see. My daughter once asked me, she said, "Are you the same at work as you are at home?" I said, "Yes, but I don't tickle anybody at work." And she said, "Please continue not to do that." So I think, you know, if you're authentic, you know, you are true to yourself. You are, and that there's a real strength in that. A lot of people define themselves by holding up a mirror to somebody else and seeing their reaction. You just need to be comfortable in your own skin to be able to be very authentic. And I'd say the final thing to me is to be generous, to assume best intent in people, to try and get the right. Everybody wants to give their best. You need to coach them to be able to give their best. And if they can't be part of the team, you need to have the courage to let them go. One thing I've learned in my career is I've never fired anybody too soon. Never felt that. It was always too late. Like I should have trusted my intuition that they were bad for the team. Even if they're a great performer, they were bad for the team. And you can't get anything done in a corporation unless you're all working together as a team. And so I think it's very hard for leaders these days. They're under a lot of pressure, a lot of political pressure, a lot of social pressure. Every single move is analyzed, psychoanalyzed, reported on by the papers. Like the Wall Street Journal is like my favorite magazine. It's like People for me. It's like I know every single person in it, and I know that half of those stories are like not true based on everything that I know. But it's, you know, that's your life when you become a leader of a big corporation. So I think we'll talk maybe about AI at some point, but I do think like leadership and traits of humanity are extraordinarily important in the world that we're entering and in this multi-constituent world that we live in. And I'll explain why that's so important going forward, but I honestly believe that our democracy and our economic system depend on companies rising above this maximize profit next quarter, but being a part of the solution to the issues that we face as a country and as a globe.
Well, you mentioned AI, and I know you spent a lot of time thinking about technology and its implications. So that's my next question. That's, you know, leaders have to do that because they got to think about the future viability of the organization, how it's going to be impacted by technological change, for example. So what do you see as the major technological changes facing us and what the implications are, if you could sort of peer into your crystal ball a bit?
Well, I think there are three technological changes that are going to impact every single one of us in this room profoundly. AI, a lot has been said about AI, but I'm going to say more about it because it's that important. Quantum is the next one. You hear about quantum computing. I'll talk a little bit about that when I think it will come about, what the implications are of it. But quantum is also quantum physics, which is upended Newtonian things that we took for granted for so long, and quantum biology as well. So quantum is one of those trends. And then you really are seeing with 5G, but really it'll happen with 6G, which will be the next generation of wireless, where all compute power will move out to the edges of the network. And these devices that cost $1,000 will cost $25 or $50, maybe less. And they'll basically be glass because all of the apps and all of your stuff will be stored at the edge of the network. And you'll just be able to download on demand what you want with zero latency. And so that will fundamentally change kind of our devices, Internet of Things, et cetera. On AI, I'm quite involved in the AI community, and get kind of like sneak peeks on what's going on, whether it be with Claude or ChatGPT and those things. And here's what I would say about that. As much of a leap as ChatGPT 4 was from ChatGPT 3, and that was a wow moment when everybody was like, holy shit, this is going to change everything. Going forward, it makes mistakes, it hallucinates, but still, wow, it is unbelievable, the power that it's releasing right now. And we can talk about the great things and the bad things that it's unleashing. ChatGPT 5 makes it look like child play from 3 to 4. I think the best way to put it to you, the best way that it's been put, is that it will be it'll be a freak out moment. It'll be a freak out moment. Such that I don't think it can be released right away because I don't think we're ready for it. So I think it has to go to like 4.5 and then 4.75 and then maybe 5 or something like that. It's going to look like it's reasoning. You'll ask it something, but there are a lot of things that I ask people and you infer the things that I'm trying to think about, even though I haven't asked you. It will do that. It'll bring in everything. It'll reason. It'll say, well, you asked me about this, but probably you were thinking about these things and you may want to consider this. And it will look like AGI to people, artificial general intelligence. It won't quite be that, but it'll be close enough that you won't know the difference. It'll be faster. It'll be more powerful. It will do things that are extraordinary. And it will be massively impactful, I think, societally. So the way that I think about it and the way CEOs around the country are thinking about it, the way the government is starting to think about it, first of all, it's very hard to control. Like, you're not going to stop the advancement of artificial intelligence. Companies are competing against companies. You got OpenAI competing against Anthropic, competing against Mistral in France, competing against all sorts of different companies. There's a tendency to try and move fast on those things when you're competing. And there's massive amounts of investment going into it from the very largest companies, tech companies in the world. You also have country against country competition. So there's very little incentive for China or for the US to stop the advancement of AI, because AI is massively important in the next generation of innovation, massively important in the next generation of military prowess. Things will be done through software and AI in military situations, much less than they're done today. I was giving this example earlier this afternoon when Syria started to build a nuclear reactor, and the Israelis found out about it through satellite imagery and other things. Israel decided, okay, we're going to attack it. We're going to send in the equivalent of 3 or 4 F-16s. You're going to come in over Turkey and Lebanon and come in, bomb it, and then take off. So when they did that, perfect formation, came in, bombed it, wiped it out, not one anti-aircraft missile was fired into the sky against those F-16s coming in. And the reason was that the Israelis had hijacked the radar systems of Syria and rendered the radar to make it look like the skies were clear. So there was no need to fire anything because the skies were clear. It's the same thing that happened with Stuxnet, with the Iranian facilities and that kind of thing. Before that, typical military doctrine was you take out command and control centers, and so you bomb them, and you send targets in, you bomb them, and then you go after your targets that you do. A very, very different world that we're entering into, which will be semi-autonomous or fully autonomous, depending on what futuristic state you can imagine. And so the race for AI is massively important for countries' geopolitical standing and where they stand in the world. So it's going to be very hard to stop the advancement of it. And so we need to be ready for the implications of it. And the implications of it could very well be that there is anywhere between a 15 to maybe 35 to 40% productivity improvement based on AI going forward. I say productivity improvement, and it's not a euphemism for layoffs, but part of productivity improvement is you get to do more with less or more, but there's going to be less people needed for the things that are that we do today. Software engineers, you're going to need 25% less, maybe 40% less. Like, it's going to be done by AI agents. Customer service will be done through AI. 80% of it will be done that way. If you're a lawyer, 50% of it will be done. Like, there's no need for paralegals. You can do all of what their research was in what would take days for an issue in a second. Like, I saw GPT-5 take a 60-page PowerPoint document and turn it into an S1 document for a public filing, which would have taken lawyers like months to go do. It did it in like a second. And so it's going to turn everything upside down. And when it turns everything upside down, think about it. It means you're going to have less people in the workforce. That's problematic because we're already a country that is beset with issues right now, with a lot of people struggling to make ends meet. You have 15% unemployment or 20%, that adds massive stress into democracies. If you think about taxes, none of us likes taxes, but taxes pay for services. You can debate on how much we should have as a country, but services are military, education, social services. If there are less people working, if less taxes, less services the government can provide, more disgruntlement there. And so when I talk about the role of companies and the way we need to think about technology and the second and third order effects of it, I mean it. It is like, what do we do around capitalism when we look at this? How do we think about work? How do we think about skill sets? How do we think about our democracy? How do we think about people radicalizing because they're dissatisfied with the system? These are all things that I think about. These are all things that other CEOs are thinking about. These are all things that we're discussing with government because we need to figure it out. Yeah. Because you can't just let it go and have nothing happen, because it will be quite impactful. And so you add quantum on top of that, and quantum is all about compute power. And quantum probably happens well, nobody knows for sure, but like the working hypothesis of most are between 2032 and 2034, which is right in the middle of your careers, that you're going to go. And quantum takes, the thing about why these agents are getting better, AI agents, are you're getting more and more transistors on a chip. So like you have now 10 to 15 billion transistors on a chip. I mean, the original IBM, PCs were like 256 transistors on a chip. Like you're at between 10 and 15 billion. That will double in 2 years. And then if you lay quantum on top of it, the amount of compute power that you're going to have in these models, it'll seem like child's play what you have today, but cyber authentication, all of that will also be impacted by it. So the reason I bring this up is not to bum everybody out at all, but because you shouldn't be bummed out, because I actually think this is one of the most exciting times that I can ever remember in terms of like wishing that I was starting all over again and looking at this, because there is going to be so much to leverage off of and to think about, whether you go into nonprofits, for-profits, or government. We're going to be rethinking everything going forward. Value propositions, the way things are done, the cost of transactions are going to come down dramatically, the amount of value to people. Medical breakthroughs are going to be unbelievable when you start crossing AI with CRISPR and other technologies. Energy, there's going to be a lot of work on energy, a lot of work on climate. These are going to be breakthroughs that will occur to our benefit. And at the same time, we got to worry about what does full employment look like? It might be that we're headed to 4-day work weeks. That's like not inconceivable to me, because we don't have enough work for people. And that's a whole different social contract that's going to go on as well. So these are the things that we need to be thinking about. These are the things we need to be taking advantage of. And these are things that we spend a lot of time as CEOs really pressing ourselves on. And now that I'm out working with governments quite closely and working with other CEOs, it's on everybody's mind, and we will need to think about it carefully, thoughtfully, but with some alacrity, because time is our enemy if we do nothing.
You mentioned a third, 6G wireless.
Yeah, 6G. So that's next generation wireless. Basically, you'll have instant connectivity, no latency, either on the upload or the download. So you'll be able to download a movie in 3 seconds, but you don't have to store it on your phone. You just store it in the network. And consequently, devices drop probably dramatically in price. Functionality of devices can go down. It can be stored in the network. And therefore, accessibility to mobile, which now is in the hands of quite a number of people, but it will go up to 80% across the world. And once everything is in this, then everything's driven by software post that. And so the amount of things you can do, whether you're in a developing country or a developed country, when all things are done through software as opposed to physical, will also change quite a number of things, and huge opportunity for people who are thinking disruptively about what's next. The one thing I just will add on AI, most of us want to do the things again that made us successful. Whatever that is, whatever made you successful, you want to repeat it, right? But you want to do it slightly better. So we all want to do 10% improvement every year. you need to start thinking about 10x improvement, not 10% improvement. Like you need to fundamentally go, what would it take to improve this by 10x, not 10%? Because you can't steer yourself or organizations or whatever you're trying to do by looking at the wake of the boat anymore and trying to get a little bit faster. Because steering by the wake of the boat is great when nothing is changing in the future. And what I'm pointing out to you is everything is changing in the future. It's like steering by the wake of the boat and there are rocks everywhere ahead of you. You need to look ahead and figure out how you're going to maneuver to go forward. You cannot just improve incrementally anymore. I told one of the classes, if you looked at the Fortune 500 of 100 years ago, Fortune 500, like the people who ran the entire country, the business titans, everything, they had all the resources, only 2% of them are left today. They're all disrupted, you know, and that's happening faster and faster and faster. Like Google, the reason they did a red alert when ChatGPT came out is because like Google, that you couldn't imagine being disrupted, will be disrupted if they don't do it. If you're like not using like Perplexity or something like that right now, it's way better than Google. I mean, you just ask whatever you want. You're not going to get all these sponsored ads in it. Like it searches from multiple sources. I mean, it's great. I'm going to France and I was like, I couldn't remember the name of this island and this restaurant that I wanted to go to. And I was just like, hello, Perplexity. Like, can you just tell me again, like, what is the restaurant on an island off the coast? And they were like, okay, here are your like 8 choices that you can, I mean, it's like perfect with no sponsored ads. So you're going to be in a whole different world right now that is fascinating for me, scary as well.
Well, we got time for one question before we get to the audience here. And you've been talking about the future of technology, but I'd like to ask a more pointed question. What's the future for Dan Schulman look like?
Yeah, my wife wants to know that as well. I'm not positive that I know that right now because I'm trying to figure out, like I'm loving my life right now, loving my life. And I'm already very busy with a lot of different things, multiple boards. I'm very interested, and I always have been very interested in serving my country. I don't know what form that will take, but I will do that. I'm working closely, you know, with businesses and the White House now. So I don't know if I want to do that full time or not. My kids tell me that that's the worst idea ever. But, and my wife does too. And we have a lot of things to fill up life. But I really care about the direction that things are going right now. I'm worried about the direction that things are going. I feel like we have a very divided country. You can see that on campuses. You can see that in our political system. I feel that I have a responsibility personally to try and do something about that. I can't do it alone, obviously, but I feel like each and every one of us, if we kind of weigh in, we can make our own bit of a difference, and that might turn the tide. You cannot abdicate responsibility. You can't complain about something and not do something. Like that's not fair.
Yeah, well put. We got a lot of questions from people that RSVP'd, and obviously we want to have time to get to them all. I think you did a great job of addressing many of the common themes, but I do want to ask you one, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience here. And you sort of touched on this earlier. The question is, how do you view the role of for-profit companies in creating social impact?
Well, I think we actually need to stand up for that. Like, I think you know, there was the credo that, you know, companies were put here to maximize profitability. And that was Milton Friedman a long time ago who basically said that. I still think companies obviously need to make money. They need to grow their earnings. They need to satisfy shareholders. It's a constituency, but it is one of many constituencies. And I think multi-stakeholder capitalism, which sometimes gets a bad name because it's conflated with ESG and gets caught up in political things and Disney and Ron DeSantis and a whole bunch of different things. Like that's takes away from the real issues of the day, which are how do corporations become role model corporate citizens? We cannot divorce ourselves from the society that we work in. When we talk about maybe 15% layoffs because of AI and 15% unemployment, that's terrible for companies. That's not like, oh, wait, wow, we're way more efficient. It's terrible. You have 15% less people who can buy now, right? It's not great for the system at all. It's like self-defeating for companies. It's a matter of like what your time frame is. Are you like concerned about profits next quarter? Or are you concerned about what your company is going to be 5 or 10 years from now? And I think we live in an interconnected world, and we need to act that way. Clearly, our planet is yelling as loudly as it possibly can that you better do something, like temperatures at all-time high, oceans at all-time high, hurricanes are more ferocious than before, weather patterns, as you know right here, are acting in weird ways, fires everywhere around the globe, coral things bleaching out. It's a mess. Companies need to do their part. We need to go towards zero carbon footprint. We need to reduce our greenhouse gases. That stuff we need to go do. I don't want to get caught up in ESG because it's got some political overtones on it. We need to do the right thing for our planet, for each other, for our employees, for our businesses. And so I think we have a real moral responsibility to step up and do that as leaders. It doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to our shareholders. We do. But we have a bigger responsibility. And if we shirk that responsibility, then I don't love what that future looks like.
All right, thank you. So we've got 2 mic runners. I want to turn it over to the audience. If you have a question, just raise your hand. Our 2 mic runners will run to you, and you can ask Dan your question. So don't be shy. We got a big packed house here. Bill, you're going to lead us off.
I was going to let a student do it, but I'll go ahead and do it.
Well, you didn't give him a chance.
As a student, I'll defer. But I was struck by your comment. You're talking about leadership in great great corporations, and I was struck by where a tipping point with one of the great American engineering firms of history, Boeing Aircraft Company.
Which one?
Boeing Aircraft Company, and I mean they're between CEOs. Their CEO's about to leave. They've had a very bad run of luck, not luck, but they've had a very bad run. You probably wouldn't be, you're between jobs, but you probably wouldn't be interested. But if an executive recruiting firm came to you, what would you advise that they look for to turn around this great American engineering firm?
Yeah. I mean, it is a great company and an important company in the United States for many reasons, defense being amongst them. I think they got too caught up in efficiency over quality. It's just my read of it. There's probably, I'm sure Dave Calhoun would have 1,000 different thoughts around this. But the next person I would bring in, Boeing, would need to create a culture of and pride in the mission of Boeing, which could be a magnificent mission. They need to kind of do what the military says, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And they really need to go in that way. They need to just do, quality does not come because you have processes in place, it's because you have people who believe. I can't force you to do something, I can inspire you maybe to do something. And so I think They need to bring in, not necessarily an engineer there, they need to bring in an inspiring leader who can bring back the pride, the vision that that company has, and the quality that is so necessary. And maybe just tell shareholders, like, you know what? It's going to be a little while before you see, but I promise you that we are trying to build a great, enduring company over the future, a great, enduring company. And this is why culture is so important, you know, why moves that might seem like efficiency, you know, may be second guessed later. Like, it's very hard to separate your headquarters from your production. But I understand, like, why, I understand the rationale for the decisions, but I also see the implications of them. But I think that's a company that can clearly be saved and should be. And I think a great CEO, like, leadership matters. It really matters in companies. They look up to you all the time. The leaders around you, I always say to everyone in my leadership team, and that's a pretty large team, every single action you do matters. Every single one. How you look at people, how you treat them. Do you say hello to them? You know, do you look them in the eye? Or when you look at them, are you looking around to see who's more important around it? Like, what are you doing to show that you respect somebody and that you admire what they're doing and that you're thankful for that? And that's what makes the burden of leadership so high. It's all the little things that have to be done, as well as the big decisions that have to be done. But Bowie can come back for sure, for sure. And I don't blame any CEO there, like, by the way, because as I know, and every CEO knows, until you walk in somebody's shoes, you don't know exactly what they're going through. You just don't. Like, people always say, well, you're going to criticize, you know, Mark Zuckerberg because he can't do that. Like, I had a lot of conversations with the guy, like, he's doing a ton of stuff that nobody knows about, you know, and, like, I don't know if anybody could do better than what he's trying to go do there. It's not easy. Like, and so I never try and preach to anybody, like, but I like to exchange points of view and see how we can all get better at what we do.
How about a question from a student? I think we got one back here in the row. Anna's running up the aisle there.
As we know that technology is far exceeding the advancements of the traditional business model, where do you think that becoming like more of an adaptive leader with all of the uncertainties in the technology world that we're encompassing on, like, where do you think that we need to focus our attention in that area?
Attention in what?
Into like the adaptive leadership versus the traditional way of business.
Yeah. Well, we're just hitting a point in time right now where the very nature of change is changing. Like, the speed of it, you know, has always been quite something. We were talking about this, like, you know, wireless happened, the internet happened, you know, things like, and it's all been like crazy fast, but it's nothing compared to what's going to be going on. And so, because that the curve of change is accelerating, we need to kind of be thinking way more into the future, because the future, you know, is going to happen way before we know it. It's sort of like, people always say, like, the future takes longer than you expect, but then when it hits, it happens more ferociously than you ever imagined. I think the two are combining right now. Like, the future is coming quicker than we imagined. It's going to hit more ferociously than we imagined. And so maybe that's 3 or 5 years or something, but it's really soon. Like, for your lifetime and for all the students in here, it's like, think about it as like the moment you join the workforce, things are going to be accelerating massively. And so we need to think about, like, what makes us different than machines? What makes us different? How do we think differently? You know, I haven't found any of these programs to imitate our soul or our spirituality or, you know, how we think about things in different ways. They're very good at extrapolating and doing things. We will not be able to extrapolate better than they do, but we will be able to imagine better what's happening. They'll have, and they should be helpful tools for us to go and do that as well. So I think, you know, the leaders of tomorrow are those who can have amazing visions for what could be, that can tap the power of data, because data is really going to be the thing that you will, like, in this kind of, I'll use a military analogy. Most people hate them. I don't love them either. But in this thing, like, of AI and algorithms, like, if those are the weapons, then data is the ammunition. And the more of that data you have, the more powerful your weaponry is in this world. And so you need to really, like, if we were talking about this today in one class, like if you're doing, you know, a simulation on how to sell t-shirts, like, it's really the data you're collecting as you're selling your t-shirts in order to personalize that sale, to cross-sell, to figure out what the next best way of paying for it is. How do you maximize somebody's, like, reward points? Where do you invest that for them? Like, it goes from the t-shirt to really, like, way more than that if you're really thinking about the logical extension of data. That's your value prop. And then you can do it at way less cost than you imagine. But you need to be thinking not incremental on this. And that's really going to be hard for leaders. Remember, I talked about quiet confidence and having the courage to make some decisions. Those are not easy decisions to make. But, like, here's the thing. Like, the great thing about most of you in the audience is you have massive amounts of time to fail a lot. And that's a gift. That's really a gift. And so don't take it too hard. Learn from it. Figure it out from there. Because, you know, when you get to be a CEO, your decisions are way bigger. Like, you're affecting 30, 40, 50,000 people. If you make a bad decision, you're in the crosshairs of regulators, and because you've got to do everything right. You got to prevent very sophisticated cyber attackers from coming in. You have to know and understand that really well. But when you're doing things, like, you can make decisions, you can start companies. They have a chance of being really disruptive and replacing Fortune 500 companies, and you can afford to fail. You can afford to fail.
I think we got a question over here.
So you spoke before about your journey as a CEO, and as I sit here in my shoes and I try to put myself in your shoes, you know, it's incredibly difficult, but, you know, you also spoke about your corporate responsibility and the morality and the balance of it all. So this all sounds very daunting and difficult, but what are some of the upsides? Like, why have you been a CEO for such a long time? What are some of the benefits? That's what I wonder.
Why what?
What are some of the pros of being in a position like you are? You know, you've been a CEO for 20 plus years. What are some of the pros?
There are a massive amount of really very satisfying things about running an organization. I mean, you can make a giant difference in the lives of not just your employees, but millions, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people in the world through your products and services. You have access to everybody in the world. So you have a platform to leverage. And that's a massive responsibility on top of it, but you do have that platform to go and do that. And so you can get audiences with anybody. You can influence in ways that, you know, we did this employee financial health initiative where we cut the cost of healthcare benefits for entry-level employees, call center employees by, what was it, 60%, something like that. I mean, massively. So they didn't have to choose between healthcare and food on the table. We gave everybody restricted stock in the company so they could share in the success and feel a part of it. So those are massive things. Like when we announced those, that was like one of my most proud moments at PayPal, because we were impacting at least 30,000 people and their families, and so, and then when other CEOs see this and see how we're measuring it, they start to do it. And now you're impacting 100,000 families. And so, so there's a lot of really great things that happen with being a CEO. It, is a very high level of responsibility, very high level of integrity on the job. Like very high level of scrutiny, and but to me it was like completely worth it, every bit of it. I love every moment. I would not trade one moment of my time at PayPal or Priceline or Virgin Mobile or any of those companies that I led, even though every single one of them had really difficult times, but they also had exhilarating times. And in the difficult times, I felt like my leadership mattered more than ever in those times, right? I mean, I was probably born this way, but probably trained through martial arts on this. Like, nothing ever bothers me. Nothing. Like, throw it at me. It's fine. Totally fine. And like, I'm gonna do my best to figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, I don't think that many people could figure it out either. So like, just throw it on.
Well, look, I think that's a great note to end on. And I want to say, Dan, thank you so much for joining us here at the University of Oklahoma and Price College.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, David. Now, don't go away just yet. As I mentioned at the top of the conversation, this is Dan's first trip to the state of Oklahoma, to the University of Oklahoma. So I want to share with him something that is quintessentially OU. You may not expect it, but I hope it's coming. Boomer! Sooner! Thank you, Dan.